Today is the second day of the World Stress Map Conference here at GFZ, and this conference is attended by about 120, 150 participants, and one among them is Professor Haimson from the University of Wisconsin in the United States. And we take the opportunity to have a short interview with Wessel and ask him a few questions. The first question I'd like to put to you, Wessel, is how did you get interested into rock stress and rock stress measurements?
Okay, this goes far back into the period of 1964-1965. I was a graduate student at the University of Minnesota, and I was just finishing my master's degree in an unrelated subject in the general field of rock mechanics. And my advisor, Professor Charles Fairhurst, who was interested in stress measurements, among other things. He was also consulting to several oil companies who got very interested in that subject at the time. Suggested to me that maybe I would like to experiment with this idea that hydraulic fracturing is somehow related to in situ stress, and that maybe we could use the same technique that the oil companies have been using for some 20 years at the time for stimulating oil fields. Maybe we could use that idea for actually estimating or determining the state of stress in the earth. And that was quite a revolutionary idea, that to take this method, which was basically a very simple technique of fracturing the rock through a well bore, and by that doing, increasing the permeability of the rock and allowing oil to flow freely into the borehole through that fracture. To use that technique to sort of inverse the aim of that technique and to use it for measuring stresses. And that was based on a previous very well-known paper published in 1957 by Hubbard and King, who were consultants to major oil companies, who tried to explain what makes hydraulic fracturing work, and they at that time claimed that fracturing the rock is a function of the state of stress in the ground. So we are going to do the opposite, to try to use the method in order to measure the stresses. And I, reluctantly or not, I accepted that idea of his, and I proceeded to doing a lot of reading, and I prepared some equipment to conduct tests, and that was my PhD thesis, wound up being on verifying the fact that hydraulic fracturing in fact is related to in situ stress.
The first experiments you conducted there in the lab, and also the thesis later also led to this very famous work you did together with the USGS in the Rangeley borehole.
Right.
And maybe you should tell us a little bit about that. It's an interesting story.
Yeah, I think so. Rangeley, Colorado is a little town of 2,000 people in the northwest corner of Colorado. And just some years back, they discovered an oil deposit there. And several major oil companies like Shell and Chevron and others got together and started exploiting this oil field. And in about 1968 or so, they suddenly discovered that lamps in this little town, in the little homes that they owned, lamps started shaking sometimes, you know, and the windows rattled. So they didn't know what it was, but they were tremors. They were small earthquakes that had never occurred before in that part of the state. And so pretty soon they realized that these were perhaps man-made earthquakes created by, at least it was only suspected at the time that they were created by the oil field operations. And the US Geological Survey got permission to use several of the holes that they drilled and turned out to be dry, to use those dry holes in order to instrument them with all kinds of pressure gauges and transducers to measure the changes in the pore pressure at the depth of the major deposit there. And they were measuring those pressures, and they realized that every time the oil field was water flooded. Water flooding is an operation where you pump in water, usually on the outside perimeter of the oil field, in order to raise the pore pressure in the field, so as to stimulate the production. In other words, the rock there is quite dense. It's a 6% porosity Weaver sandstone, and after several years of production, the pores get clogged and very little production occurs, even though the oil in the deposit was still there, quite a bit of it. So by pumping water, basically tap water from the outside or groundwater, pumping it into the oil deposit, you raise the pressure and you force the oil, which is usually lighter than water, to come and be welled up into the wells. Anyway, and what the pressure transducers recorded is that every time water flooding occurred, the pressure in the rock rose, and as the pressure rose, so did earthquakes occur. And so there was a definite correlation between pore pressure and earthquakes. And what they also found, there was a major fault which was dormant, was dead, nothing happened. But the suspicion was that this fault was sort of what you would call lubricated by this water and pressure in the rock, and that's what created these earthquakes. But they needed to, in order to actually establish that this was the fact, they needed to know the state of stress in the ground there and relate it to the pore pressure and to the earthquakes. And in 1970, I presented the results of my thesis to the National Rock Mechanics Symposium, which was held in Berkeley. And the Geological Survey in charge of this research was located in Menlo Park, California, which is just about 1 hour drive from Berkeley. And several people from the Geological Survey came to the meeting in Berkeley and heard my presentation, among others. And immediately after, Barry Raleigh, who was the chief of tectonophysics at the survey at the time, came and talked to my former advisor, who was there, Professor Verhast, and said, why don't you guys come to Menlo Park for a visit, and maybe you can present this to our group there, this talk, which we did the next day. We drove over there, and I presented this talk, and then the people at Geological Survey had a discussion among themselves. Some people were completely against it, and some people were for it. And anyway, Barry Raleigh, which I have to credit him for that, took the initiative of taking a chance and asked me to prepare a proposal, and funded us to the tune of $40,000, which at that time was a lot of money. because it's a field experiment. It's always very expensive. And in the following year, I believe, I prepared the equipment and we went to the oil field without any prior experience. And here we were faced with a borehole that was allowed for us to use, and a borehole that we had to test it at a depth of 6,500 feet, which is like 2,000 meters, which was a real test for the first time. And anyway, we tested for tests. We ran 4 tests, and only one was really successful. And that one test gave us an estimate of the stresses, and of course there was no way to check if it was correct or not, but we assumed that it was the right measurement, and that fit almost to perfection. The fact that when the pore pressure reached a certain level, the more Coulomb criteria and the stresses really became tangent to each other, which it's hard to explain here in words, but you know what I'm saying. And that explained why the stresses were really a factor in and the pore pressure together matched to give us the reason why the earthquake occurred.
What do you see as the major problems to be attacked in the future regarding this particular method?
Well, regarding stress measurement in general.
Stress measurement in general, and stresses in the Earth's crust and stresses in rocks in general.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there are several things. First is the fact that, as far as I know, as of today, we have no real proof that what we measure is exactly the state of stress. We believe we do, believe is really not the right term. We have all indications that we are measuring the actual stress, but no real proof. And the only way that I can think of right now of proving or verifying whether, if we say that a certain stress is 100 MPa, that it's really 100 and not 85 or 150, and so on. How do we do that? This came up in relation to DUSEL. DUSEL is an acronym standing for Deep Underground Scientific and Engineering Laboratory, which is being right now in preparation, actually, in the United States, in an old mine, in an old gold mine in South Dakota, which is really still in preparatory stage. So probably any test will not be conducted before, say, 2 or 3 years from now. What we are planning there to do is to take a large block of rock, say 5 to 10 meters on each side, and prepare slots on each of the 4 sides of this huge cubical in situ specimen, and allow the 2 faces, 2 parallel faces, to be pressurized simultaneously by some means, such as what used to be called flat jacks, which allows to apply pressure. Anyway, allow us to apply artificially a certain given state of stress, and then drill some boreholes in the center of this, near the center anyway, of this huge block of rock, and insert in it hydraulic fracturing equipment, borehole, any of the overcoring methods, and conduct this test, and first of all compare one with the other, and also compare the results of the test with the actual applied stresses which we can control, and hopefully that will give a real indication that the measurements that we are making are really correct in absolute terms. That's one thing that is needed, that to really allow people to sleep well at night, knowing that what they are measuring is the real stress and not something imaginary. In addition, of course, especially in geothermal boreholes and in oil field related boreholes, they are getting deeper and deeper. Oil fields are more developed offshore than on solid ground, on solid earth. And measuring stresses in these cases is becoming quite a bit more difficult. Hydraulic fracturing, for example, has the problem that for geothermal wells, for example, the rubber used in those packers can, even what is called high temperature packers, may not hold. It's all in fact a matter of technology, basically, that we have to fight. I'm aware of the new quadruple packer that is being developed in Sweden by Vattenfall, and which is supposed to strengthen the packers that are directly on both ends of the interval, of the stress interval, because at greater depth and greater stresses, the packers can blow up if the pressure is too high, and by installing 2 more packers, that would minimize that situation in terms of minimize the danger of packers blowing up, and that is some solution, but not permanent one, because it may go even beyond that. We may need maybe 200 MPa for fracturing. So the deeper we go, the more hostile condition in terms of temperature, in terms of pressure and all this, everything becomes more difficult, and that requires a very new look at the technology involved. And of course there are new other methods that are being developed, mainly based on borehole breakouts. And yesterday the talk by Dick Plum from Schlumberger was quite interesting, in that with all these new findings that they come up with. And so that's what I foresee as a problem of technology mainly.